I got dressed and put makeup on, so I thought I'd record a video. 13 books, including 2 DNFs. This is my November reading wrap-up. Let's discuss the books that I loved, the ones that I liked, and the ones that I kind of loathed. Welcome back. I am Carly. I read and review books, primarily historical fiction or historical fiction adjacent, literary fiction or women's fiction. And I'm still pretty new here. I think I get to say that for a few more months. So if you haven't stumbled upon my channel and you just so happen to find this video, thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. I have lots of fun things cooking for 2026. But today I want to talk about my November 2025 reads. It was a pretty good reading month for me, I won't lie. I had a few really stellar standouts, a couple of which I think are going to end up on my best of 2025 reading list. And I had a few that I could not put down fast enough. And then I think there were a few that I've already kind of forgotten. So we'll see what I remember about those books. I have quite a few of them back here. My shelves are kind of a mess, kind of like my life. It's the busy season at work right now, so I'm trying to squeeze in recording and editing, so my posting may not be as consistent as I would like, but I'm here, I'm reading. We're gonna do this kind of haphazardly. Last month, I did kind of a little bit of a vlog and a look at my month. I'm not gonna do that this month with my reading wrap up, because I am creating a vlog for our trip to Big Bear, and that was super fun, and I think that's going to be not necessarily the most bookish. It'll really just be about having some fun and downtime in a cute little town. I'm still kind of experimenting with vlogging, and I just got a new camera. I bought it. It hasn't arrived yet. That's supposed to help me with vlogging, and I'm really excited about it and like really pumped up about that. So all right, enough about me, enough about 2026, enough about content. Let's talk about books. As always, every book that I talk about will be linked below. Any support that you show through affiliate links helps to support this passion project of mine, and I appreciate it. Okay, up first is an arc that I really enjoyed. It's called The Italian Secret. This is by Tara Moss. So this is the continuation of a series about Billy Walker, who is a post-World War II private investigator in Australia. I love her. I picked up the second in the series when she published that as an advanced reader copy and really enjoyed it. I decided to read this third book before reading the first book, which is still on my TBR. So I guess I'm saying you don't have to read these in order. You could probably pick up any one of them. I felt the same way reading book 3 that I read that I felt in reading book 2 is I got a lot of the history, so she fills in a lot of the blanks about Billy's past and kind of what's been happening in Billy's life leading up to the moment in time in which the book is set. Billy's story is she was a journalist during the war and can't find work in the journalism field after the war because all the men have come home and there's no place for women in the workplace, right? So she decides to take up the helm of her father's private investigator business. He has recently passed, so there's a lot of, in book 2 and now in book 3, The Italian Secret, there's a lot of kind of grief and loss elements to the story about her own experience with her father. She didn't make it home in time to see him before he passed. Those kind of weigh heavy with Billy. And this book in particular revolved a lot around her dad. So a couple of things are happening in the book. She has this case that she has kind of cracked the code on and thought that she solved, and things go really badly awry, and it's got her spiraling. Something happened to her client and it's really got Billy in a bad way. Now, also, she, while cleaning out her father's files, she found a photo of her father, a woman, and a child in Italy. And she's like, who is this woman? Who is this kid? There's also a stack of cash and a stack of love letters. So she decides she has to know who this woman is, what this secret is, who are these people, you know, in relation to her father. while also she's going to take a trip to Italy as kind of like a vacation. It's her first time off in quite some time. She feels like she needs that break. After the event with her client, she sails with her mother and her mother's companion to Italy, and some things happen along the way. It's a great mystery. It's a fun mystery series led by a female private investigator who's still clinging on to her victory red lipstick and her, nice dress suits. And I don't know, it has a little bit of that 40s, 50s film quality that I love about books set in this era, particularly focused on things like the woman's sense of style, what she's wearing, how she carries herself. All of those things are really fascinating to me. I am not a fashion person by any means. I've never been that person, but I find it really fun that women used to get really, really dressed up every day. I barely get dressed every day. So, I like that in a book. I feel like it's a fun sort of escape for me. It's real, but not real for me, if that makes sense. I finally finished Philippa Gregory's The Boleyn Traitor, and it's not for lack of interest. This book had me so captivated, but initially I only had a physical copy from the publisher while waiting on a Libby hold for the audio. A lot of times I have to supplement my physical reading with audio, so I'll kind of bounce back and forth between the books. Sometimes read them at the same time, listen and read at the same time. I'm just a really slow reader when it comes to physical books. I don't know why. I can read lightning fast on my Kindle. But anyway, it took me a while, and I eventually read the last hour or so of it via audio and enjoyed both formats. Loved this story so much, but I also really enjoy Philippa Gregory's work. I've read about 5 of her books now, and I love her writing style and her careful attention to detail that really brings the period to life. Are they the most historically accurate? I have a couple of friends in the book talk space and on the Bookstagram space who are actual historians and say that she's not the most accurate. So it really kind of frustrates them with regard to her books because, they feel that it's important for historical fiction, even though it's fiction, to stay true to the account. And I totally understand that. But hey, I am not a scholar. I am a reader. And I'm here to talk about what I enjoy, and I enjoy the heck out of her books. This is all about Jane Boleyn, the sister-in-law of Anne Boleyn, and Jane's place in court, not only during Anne's reign as queen, but beyond. The thing about Jane is Jane was raised in the court. So she grew up in the court, and she is very much entrenched in court life even before she marries Anne's brother. When she marries Anne's brother, she kind of rises to a level of power within the ladies in waiting and stays there even beyond Anne's reign. She is very, I wouldn't say power hungry. You do get a glimpse of that with this character, but she's very smart, and she is very adept at manipulating situations to her advantage or to the advantage of the queen that she's serving or to her benefactor. And we get to see her act in sort of a spy-like way to help move agendas along, depending on who is in power within Henry's court and who is sitting on the throne as queen. It was really fascinating, and I thought it was so well done. I rated this a 4.5 star, and I absolutely adored it. I thought that it was just great. I loved it. I felt very captivated by this character, meaning you are in the head of Jane Boleyn throughout the whole book, and you're really getting a sense of who she is as a person and what things have her feeling anxious, frightened, excited, as well as what's happening around her. So I thought that was really, really terrific. I don't know why I'm not holding these books up for you guys. Oh, we've already talked about this. I mean, look at this cover. It's so stunning. Let's talk about I Am You. This was a gifted copy from the publisher Zando. I actually just gave away a physical ARC of this on Instagram. I'm doing Instagram giveaways the entire month of December, so at least one per week. So if you're not following me there, I would strongly go encourage you to do so. I need to get rid of some books, and giveaways are a fun way to do that. I get a lot of books from publishers. Sometimes I get duplicates. In this case, I got a duplicate, so I gave one away. I really enjoyed this book, and I think that anybody who really appreciates art and art history is going to be drawn to this book. So this is about two women in the Dutch Golden Age. So we're talking 1600s Amsterdam, one of which became a famous artist, Maria van Oosterwijk. Let me make sure I said that right. I did. So Maria becomes famous for her still life paintings, particularly of flowers. I'll put a couple here so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. Her paintings are beautiful. And I love when a book makes me do this. I had to go directly to Google. I want to see some of Maria van Oosterwijk's work, and I was immediately captivated. Absolutely stunning. These were gorgeous, gorgeous floral still lifes. This is about Maria, as I said, as well as her maid, Gerta. Gerta started her life in Maria's family's household as a boy, even though she was disguised as a boy, I guess I should say. And at some point, Maria and her family decide that it's time for Maria to go from the family household and establish herself in an artist colony, and she needs to take a maid with her. She learns that Gerta is in fact a girl and decides that she's going to train Gerta to be her maid, and discovers along the way that Gerta is actually really good at creating ink, the necessary inks for the paints and dyes that Maria needs. So she starts to take an interest in Gerta becoming her apprentice. Eventually, Gerta becomes adept at painting as well, and doing what's called underpainting. So that would mean Maria does the outlining of the painting itself, and then Gerta would go in and apply colors, shading, and things like that. As the story goes, Gerta becomes very talented, and there becomes a little bit of a tug and pull in terms of power as it relates to artistic ability and the public's perspective of who is the artist, who is really the artist behind these works. Along with that, they have a relationship that becomes more than just maid and lady. So it is a sapphic novel, know that. It's not overtly sexual, but there definitely are scenes where you are, it has some open door moments. Let's just say that, which isn't always my favorite thing, but I thought this was tasteful. There is so much about art in this book. It really goes into the making of the dyes and the application of paints to the canvas and style and technique. Rembrandt even has a moment in this book, which I thought was really terrific. It was such a good book for anyone, as I said, anyone who loves art and art history, and seeing what it was like for a woman to be in that type of position, not necessarily the position of the maid, but in Maria's position, trying to make a name for herself in a man's world, which was the art world of that time. So really enjoyed this. Highly recommend if you love art and art history. It's a good one. How about my first DNF of the month? I was so excited about this book. The Book of Lost Hours by Haley Gelfuso. This was billed as a magical realism, kind of time slip novel. Usually I love those. And there were aspects of this book that I did really enjoy. However, there are a couple of things that made it very difficult for me to get into it and to stay interested. And eventually I just decided, you know what, I don't think this book is the right book for me, at least not at this time. But I also don't know that I would ever pick it up again. So it's going to be in a giveaway or a little free library drop soon. I primarily listened to this one, which I think is part of the issue. I found it hard to keep track of which timeline we were in, who was our point, whose point of view were we experiencing at any given moment in time. Part of that, I think, was driven by the audio experience, but also there are some jumps, and it's not always, at least in my opinion, obvious what's going on. In addition to that, there is a lot of focus on the space-time continuum in this book and kind of how time works. That is the whole premise of this book, is there are jumps in time, using time and manipulating time, and what is time, and it's not my jam. It's not my jam. But I do think that other people might really love this book if you're kind of into that. There is a World War II timeline. It kind of begins in the World War II setting, and it jumps ahead as well as back, and you're living in this space that isn't really part of time. I don't know. It wasn't for me, but I know a lot of people have really enjoyed this. I shared on Bookstagram. I shared my review on Bookstagram of this book, and a couple people chimed in that they were really sad that I didn't enjoy it because they really, really loved it. So I think it's just it's me. It's not you. It's not you. It's me. I loved this book. First of all, this book is tiny. Let's see, 195 pages. So if you're looking for a short book that packs a big punch to read before the end of the year to try and meet a reading goal, if that's your thing, Tin Man by Sarah Winman should be on your radar. First of all, this woman can write. Second of all, just like my favorite book of all time, which she also wrote, Still Life, there are no punctuation marks in this book. So it made it a little bit of a struggle at first, but it's still beautiful and it still worked, just like Still Life. Once I figured it out, once I got a flow, it just flew by. But it did take me a few minutes, maybe a little bit longer than that, to get the vibe. You know what I mean? To get the flow of the dialogue and what's dialogue and what's not, because there are no punctuation marks. I recommend both the audio or the physical, whatever you can get your mitts on. This book was so stunning, y'all. I should have done a better job of promoting this book in honor of World AIDS Day on December 1st, and I just didn't connect the dots, because that is a big part of this book and one of the reasons why it is so stunning and beautiful. So this book is about 3 characters, 2 male, 1 female, right? The 2 men we meet as young men at some point in the book, like boys, and they grow very, very close in response to some of the things that are going on in each of their lives. And at some point they start to experiment sexually, and one discovers that he is absolutely smitten with the other. I'm not giving anything away. It's pretty obvious from the synopsis. The other later meets a young woman and falls head over heels in love with her, and she with him. And the 3 of them have this really close bond. At some point in time, they grow apart, and this book explores that period of time in which they grow apart. It explores the period of time in which they first meet. It explores the periods of time when they first meet. It explores the period where the 2 young men are starting to experiment and kind of the fallout from that. It is just so spectacular. What I will say is that it is difficult at sometimes to figure out where we are in relation to time, but you just kind of have to go with it. It's almost like a stream of consciousness, and if you just run with it, it clicks eventually. Each chapter starts with a year, so I don't know why I had such a hard time figuring it out. Maybe it's not just the time, but it's also the point of view, because it does shift from time to time. So, and it's not very clear in the book whose perspective, it's not really clear whose perspective we're experiencing at the beginning of the chapter. You kind of have to let it flow to figure it out. But overall, so stunning. It's told over the course of several years. You have a late 60s into the 70s and into the 80s timeline, and it's just spectacular. Spectacular. Like, I cannot wait to read more of her work. It had been a year or like a year and a half or more since I read Still Life, and I was like, I really need to pick up more of her work because I talk about Still Life all the time, and if you have not read it yet, what are you waiting for? This is not as good because, I mean, it's tiny. I wanted more. I didn't want it to end, but it is really spectacular. It was November, you know, and most people read nonfiction in November. A lot of people read nonfiction all the time. I don't. You know, the period of time in my life when I wasn't reading fiction was spent reading either nothing or nonfiction for work and school. And I think I just got really burnt out on nonfiction because it became a chore. It became part of my learning experience, my clinical experience, and I was reading highly clinical books. I am a social worker by trade, so a lot of the books that I read during that period of time were either social work textbooks or books that were intended to expand my clinical knowledge in certain aspects of the field. So when 2020 came along and I found myself reading again, you know, in great quantities, I wanted nothing to do with nonfiction. I mean, think about that period of time. I don't think any one of us wanted to spend any time in reality. So needless to say, I have not read a lot of nonfiction over the last couple of years. I have read 2 or 3 this year. I think 2. This is my second. But it was so freaking good. I'm talking about Scream With Me by Eleanor Johnson. Horror Films and the Rise of American Feminism, 1968 through 1980. This was so interesting from a film lover's perspective, as well as the clinical piece of it, the feminist piece of it, and the correlation between what was happening in the feminist movement and in American politics as it relates to what was happening on the film screen. So smart, just really, really sharp. And it has me and my partner, I actually read quite a bit of passages from this book to him as I was listening and reading to listening to this and reading it. And he was even kind of, interesting. So it might be a fun thing to explore if you or your partner really love film. And I'm going to tell you which films this focuses on. These are not necessarily standout horror films. They're not like, I don't know. When I think of horror films, I think of Freddy. Probably because I'm scarred for life by Friday the 13th films. That's a whole nother story. But these books aren't those books, or these films aren't those types of films. It has us eager to go back and rewatch all of the ones that we have watched, and to watch the one of the 6 that the book focuses on that we have not yet watched. This book focuses on 6 films, some of which huge films. Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, The Stepford Wives, which is the only one that we have not yet seen, The Omen, Alien, and The Shining. It also talks about a resurgence of domestic horror films in the 2000s. That was an interesting part of the book, but the meat and potatoes of this book is talking about those 6 films and the relationship between, again, feminist politics, American history, and domestic horror. So freaking good. So good. I loved this. I really, really, really enjoyed this and would read more by this author and would definitely read more things like this. So if you have any recommendations specifically about, I love film. I really, really love film. I'm not a huge memoir person though. I don't know. So I don't need those. So if you have any recommendations for books like this about film history, let me know. Let's consult. Oh, where did that go? I can't keep my book straight. Somewhere in here is The Silent Companions, which I also finished. Took me a while. I only had a physical copy of that. I read most of that in October, finished in November, Really enjoyed it. It was my first Laura Purcell book, and she comes highly recommended by one of the go-to sources for me on Bookstagram for Gothic fiction, and that's Mother Horror. I've talked about her in other videos. I love everything that she does, and she says that Laura Purcell is like the queen of Gothic fiction. I understand why she said that. The book was great. Was it a 5-star read for me? No. I think I rated this 4.25. For me, it just drug a little bit, and I don't know if that was because of just my slow reading pace, because I was reading a physical book, or if the book was just dragging a little bit. So it is a little bit slow moving, but there are some really big pivotal plot points that grab your attention and keep you engaged. It just felt at times like, when's the next one coming? But overall, I thought it was really terrific. It was creepy. It was really, really, really creepy. And there is a prequel coming out. It's already out, I think, in the UK. It's coming out here in February, I think. House of Splinters, that is supposed to give a little bit, take us back to that story or storyline. Very intrigued, and we'll be reading that for sure. I have a couple of other Purcell books that I ordered at the same time that I ordered the Silent Companions. They're a special cover, or a special set of covers, all paperback, that I really loved. I'll link those below in case you want to check those out. I like matchy books. I like pretty things. Overall, I really enjoyed this. So it's the story of a young woman who finds herself recently widowed and pregnant. So he died while preparing his family estate for them to live in and raise their child in. So he left London, goes to the seat of the family, so to speak, and is there, and something dreadful, awful happens to him. He passes away. She goes along with his young cousin, who's kind of become her companion, to the family estate to lay him to rest, and decides to stay there. And not long after she arrives, do some weird things start happening. Specifically, these wooden companions. Originally, when I read the synopsis, I imagined like these small little wooden figures, but no, my understanding from the book is that they're like these almost life-size, kind of like a cardboard cutout is how I imagine them in my head. They're wooden life-size figures that are hand-painted onto this wood, and each of them represents someone real that has passed away. Over time, these wooden companions kind of just take over. They do terrible, awful, horrible things, or cause the people in the home to do terrible, awful things. So you're getting all of this, like what's happening in the more contemporary timeline, which is still Victorian. Plus you're getting this kind of middle-aged timeline of the family history and kind of where all this began. It's creepy. It's really creepy, and I highly recommend it if you like creepy Gothic things. It was very good. Again, I thought it could have been a little bit faster paced, but maybe that's just me. It still was a really, really great read, and I am going to read the prequel, and I'm also going to be reading her other works that I ordered. Oh, Amity by Nathan Harris. I listened to this and really enjoyed it. This is the story of a young brother and sister who were recently emancipated but still living in their former owner's home. At some point, the former owner decides that he and the sister of the brother-sister duo are going to head west. They're specifically going to the Mexican desert, and they're going there because he's been told he can go and lay claim to land that may or may not have a silver mine. And he's taking her because he has an affection for her, one that she does not share for him. So the brother and sister are split up. The brother's going to stay behind with the former owner's wife and daughter, And at some point, they're going to be called for. So time passes, and eventually they are called for. And they set off on a journey to go to the Mexican desert to meet the former owner and sister. We see from both perspectives, the sister's perspective and the brother's perspective, and both are kind of on this odyssey. But this story is very much an odyssey type story. They are experiencing the hardships of the land. They're in really dangerous, unfamiliar territory and situations. And they're meeting people and types of people that they've never encountered before. And it just is really rich for that reason. I enjoyed this very much. I particularly loved the sister's perspective because she had some really unique way of looking at things like family, what it means to be family, what it means to be a sibling, what it means to be a sister specifically. She also had some really unique way of looking at freedom and what does freedom mean to her. So yeah, it was really an interesting journey. I very much enjoyed this book and would read more by Harris. I have not read The Sweetness of Water because it's such a chunk, but I know a lot of people really do love it, and I could see myself reading that now that I've read Amity. I've always been intimidated by it, and what if I won't like it? I'm not even going to give it a shot. And now I'm kind of like, maybe I need to read that because I felt very drawn to these characters, mostly because of the sibling story. I love sibling stories. So if you are like me and like a good sibling story, I think that you'd be drawn to this book. It also had not necessarily a Wild West feel. I'm reading Lonesome Dove right now, and it's nothing like that. But it definitely has some of the hardship and the grittiness and the arid climate and the chaparral and the dust and just all those things were present in this book. So it wasn't a Wild West book, but it was definitely had a Western feeling. I enjoyed it. I liked it. The Girl in the Green Dress. I read this, and I've already kind of forgotten. I gave it like a 3.5, probably maybe closer to 3.25. It wasn't a bad book. It was not a bad book. Mariah Fredericks did a great job. It just was not the most rememberable. It wasn't the most memorable story. What can I tell you about this book? I did enjoy the portrayal of Zelda. Loved that. So this is about he's a journalist, a young writer, I believe he is, journalist, writer, who comes to New York and somehow finds himself in the same orbit as Zelda Fitzgerald. And he and Zelda set out to solve a crime. A young woman was seen running from the property of a man who is discovered deceased. And everyone suspects that she is the murderess, and they are determined to discover who is she and did she do it. And along the way, they develop this kind of camaraderie and friendship, and through the murder mystery solving efforts, we kind of get to discover a little bit of what Zelda is like, and we get a little bit of a glimpse into her madness. And maybe not her madness, but we get a little bit of a glimpse into her, what's the right word? She's very self-involved. How much of that was Zelda's personality versus kind of that generation and that lifestyle. It's all kind of jumbled together a little bit and done really well, So the portrayal of Zelda Fitzgerald was really fun. I enjoyed it. I thought that it was well done. I'm not screaming from the rooftops about it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't read it. It was a fun mystery. I will tell you that. I was intrigued by it. I didn't guess the twists. So I was intrigued enough to continue reading the book to find out who done it. Another book that I own a physical copy of, oh, here it is. I believe this was on my 10 before the end, and I wanted to get to this book because, number one, everybody that I know that has read it has loved it and has said it's one of the best books that they've read all year. It was also in the running for the Goodreads Choice Awards Historical Fiction, And I was like, I don't think this is historical fiction, y'all. And I actually commented that, said something about that on Instagram, and the author chimed in and said, yeah, no, it's not. So how frustrating must that be for authors who get lumped into a category that they feel like doesn't represent their book, even though, you know, again, as I said before in my Goodreads Choice Awards response videos, I'm sure it's great, like for business. You know, it's great recognition, it's great coverage from a marketing perspective. To have their book be part of any category for the Goodreads Choice Awards means that they're getting exposure that they may not have otherwise received. However, that must be frustrating. I'm talking about the Bright Years by Sarah Damoff. This was really good. Was this the best book that I read all year? Absolutely not. I think it could have been a little bit longer. I was a little frustrated at times by the way that the author portrayed alcoholism, specifically from the perspective of the husband who is the alcoholic. You know, it's very much, and someone actually, I'm kind of copying her, one of my friends on Bookstagram said it so eloquently. He is a victim in this. I don't know if I'm expressing that very well. I don't have a personal close family history of addiction. However, I have worked with addicts and their families very closely in previous positions, and specifically alcoholics. And I can definitely tell you that a lot of what this book portrays is very real and very raw. Again, I don't have that personal experience. I only have secondhand knowledge of what that experience is like. But I think that from what I understand, this book does a great job of capturing that. This is the story of two young people who meet, fall in love, get married, have a kid, and over the course of several years, kind of fall apart. And part of that is due to his alcoholism. I think there's also some other things that come into play that I won't name, that I found interesting. Communication styles, for example. I did love that the female main character, you know, she kind of drew the line in the sand for herself and stood up for herself in a way that you don't always see in a book, and I really appreciated that. There is some domestic violence portrayed in this book, so know that going in if that's a trigger warning for you. If you're strongly triggered by books that portray addiction and the impact of addiction, specifically alcoholism, on families, know that going in. You're going to get a lot of that. That's what this book is about. But it is very well written. It is set in the 80s and 90s. I think it starts in late 70s. Yeah. Starts in like 79 and goes into the 80s, 90s, and beyond. I appreciated how we got to see characters develop and grow or not over the course of many years. I really liked the daughter's perspective in this book. You get both the parents' perspective and for much of the book. However, there is a shift at some point. The daughter becomes a young adult. You start to see more and more of her perspective in the book, and I really appreciated that. I thought that the ending was beautifully executed. Beautifully. And I understand why a lot of people are saying it's a tearjerker. It's one of those that's going to live with you. So really liked that about this book. Highly recommend. I just want to say go in knowing a little bit more about the book because it may be triggering. Okay, we're probably losing some light here too. Oh, I'm long-winded today. Oh, another book that I DNF'd, Victorian Psycho. I was really excited about this book, and I started it on audio while I was traveling to Louisiana, and I don't know, it was really dark. It's twisted. The main character, the female main character, is really dark. So her outlook on life and her actions and her thought processes to which you are privy are dark, even murderous. That wasn't for me. I don't know if it was just kind of where I was at that particular point in time in life, but I didn't think that I wanted to live in that dark space. Now, I will tell you that a lot of people really like this book and like it for what it is, meaning that it is a trauma response. So her darkness is a trauma response. I did skip ahead and kind of check out the ending just to know like a little bit more about the character. I get why people say that it's an interesting portrayal of trauma response, but I don't know. I thought it would be different. I think I got about 30 to 40% into this book and was just like, I don't know, I'm not vibing with it. It's funny because part of it is set during Christmas, and I was like, oh, okay, this is perfect for the holiday season. I was like, oh, whoa, this is a little outside of my interests. But then, I don't know, I shouldn't say that because I really love horror and gothic. In all, I thought it was the right decision that I made to DNF this. Does that mean it's a bad book? No. It just means it was kind of like, woo, woo. We're down to my favorite 2 books of the month, one of which I have a physical copy. The other I won a physical copy of from a fellow bookstagrammer, book talker, and I'm waiting for it to come in the mail. I'm sure it's coming via media mail, which always takes forever, especially this time of year. I loved Sonora by Jenny Walsh so much. And I won a copy, and I can't wait to get my mitts on it because it is going in my stack of forever favorites from the year 2025. I love this book so much, y'all. If you loved Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken the way that I loved Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken in the 90s, you must read this book. It is based on the female main character that inspired the film. From what I remember, it's a little bit more of a richer portrayal of her story. There were aspects of the book that I think were better than the film, though keep in mind I haven't watched that film in a very, very, very long time. However, it was just as gut-punching and heartfelt and inspiring and all those things that I loved about that film. So both the film and the book are about Sonora. Sonora was a high-diving horsewoman. So in the 20s and 30s, there were teams of high-diving horses that would travel around, and at some point, someone made the incredibly wise decision to add a woman to the show, meaning the horse would run up a ramp, the woman would jump on the horse's back, and then the woman and the horse would dive from a platform into a tank of water. Well, if you've seen the film, then you know the outcome of this particular woman's story. I don't want to spoil it, but she gets injured, let's just say that, diving, and it changes her life. But Sonora is not going to let it keep her down. She comes close. She gets real depressed and sad, and she comes real close. But she's a fighter. She's got some really good people in her corner that she's developed relationships with throughout the early part of the book that help her, and it's just so good. What I really enjoyed about this book was the glimpse into late 20s, early 30s, Depression era life. We get the sense that the Depression's creeping in, hardship is creeping in, but people are still coming out to see this act, when it comes to town. And I don't know, I was just really transported back to that period of time and thought that it was really well done from that perspective. I loved the characters, the relationships that develop within the story, the portrayal of the female main character, her tenacity and her fighting spirit and her bravery. Like, who does that? I wouldn't do that. Absolutely not. I mean, you'd be doing good to get me on a horse's back, much less jumping on the horse's back on a 40-foot platform and then diving into a tank on the back of a horse. Like, who does that? Who in their right mind did that back then? That is such a fascinating thing to me, that women do wild and crazy things like that, like go into space. Like, I could never. I mean, I've done some wild and crazy things, but that's just like next level for me. That was really fun to kind of ride in her saddle, so to speak, and go on the journey with her from the very beginning to the very end. I really enjoyed this book, and it tugged every single heartstring. Tears were shed. it was an emotional experience that harkened back, so it was very nostalgic. It harkened back to that emotional experience of watching that film over and over and over again as a young girl, I should say. I think, when did that film come out? Let's see, 1991. I was about to turn 11. Loved that movie so much. Now for my favorite reading experience of November. And y'all, I could cry thinking about it because I did shed quite a few tears at the end of this book. Mostly because of the epic journey that this book culminated, or the culmination of an epic journey with this book. And it reminded me a lot of my mother. And I was home in Louisiana listening to this and thinking of her, and y'all. Talking about the Book of Magic by Alice Hoffman, the final book in the Practical Magic series. This was the best of the series, hands down. This is a contemporary book, so not historical whatsoever. If you want the more historical versions of this family story, check out the link to my blog posts down below, including a suggested reading order, now that I've read them all. This was so beautifully done. First of all, Alice Hoffman has a way with words. Like, I love her. I love her writing. She's so cathartic. And what I mean by that is you really feel like you get to know these characters and you're experiencing their experience, their emotional experience, what's happening in their lives. In addition to that, she has a knack for the everyday magic and portraying the everyday magic of life, of living, of what it means to be alive in a very special way. Yes, there are spells and potions and things like that in this book, but it's not a caricature of witches and witchcraft, if that makes sense. It's just the little nuggets that, if your mom was like my mom, a little bit of a house witch, she always had a little salve for something, or, she always had a little saying or something that just added a little flair to everything. And I feel like that is exactly what it's like reading a Hoffman novel, that there's just little bits of flair, little bits of magic, little bits of just a sprinkle of something special in everything that Hoffman does. This book especially. This one is dark. It is very dark. So if you've read any of the other books, I would say Magic Lessons is almost as dark as this, and that is the origin story of the Owens family and the most historical novel of the series. That one's pretty dark, but this one is much, much darker. And the part of that is because there is a lot of dark magic used in this book. And that's part of the plot or the storyline. So if you've ever read Practical Magic, you'll recognize Sally and Jillian and Franny and Jet. All four women are in this book. Sally's daughter, Kylie, is kind of the main character in this book. Kylie is very sheltered throughout her life. Sally does not want her to know the family's history with magic and does not teach her to embrace her magic. In fact, Kylie's kind of clueless when it comes to that. She doesn't know that she can't fall in love because she's cursed, as all the Owens women are. Well, what happens is she falls in love, and the second that she declares her love for her boyfriend, he is gravely injured. Then, as part of her response to what's happening to him, she discovers the curse and sets out to break the curse. In doing so, she puts herself in harm's way, and it's up to Franny, Jet, Sally, and Jillian to find her and to stop what's happening. What was so fascinating to me about this book, and I think one of the reasons that I loved it so much, is I read the other three books like lickety split a couple years ago. I read them boom, 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 one after the other. And then I didn't pick this one up, even though I owned it. And I don't know why. I loved them all. Practical Magic was actually my least favorite in the series, by the way. But I never picked this up. And as soon as I started this book, all those characters came rushing back to me. All the little nuggets and nuanced things about the characters. It was like, ding, it was right there. And I think that's a testament to Hoffman's ability to craft characters. And I was really, really, really fascinated by that. I highly recommend reading this, but do not read this first. Do not read this before reading the other books. In fact, I would say no matter what order you read the other books in, this one has to be last, because there are things in this book that will spoil other aspects of the previous 3 books. So it's now dark essentially in here. I've lost my lighting. Shame on me for not preparing for a very long, lengthy video. I'll do better next time with my lighting. It's just been such a weird transition into fall and winter. My room is kind of dark this time of year, and it's just a struggle to say all the things that I want to say to you guys in the short window of time that I have to do it. So I'm going to work on my artificial lighting, which I really don't like, but that's the breaks. I want to hear from you. Have you read any of these books? Do you agree with me? What do you think about them? What was your favorite book of November? Are any of these on your reading radar? What are you reading right now? Let's discuss.